So, welcome back. I think what we need to do right now is to pick up from where we left off last time. We had seen how we can design our stored procedures and also how we can be able to invoke them directly using the tools that we have at our disposal, which is any MySQL client, really. So, today I want us to see how we can create what we call a REST API. REST API basically means that we are able to connect to our database, we are able to execute the instructions from our database without necessarily being in the database directly. So it could be an application, it could be a system to system integration, or any other thing that can be able to invoke or call the API. So we're going to create REST APIs today and we're going to see how that works out. Now, the platform I'm going to use is PHP. I'm going to use a PHP backend to be able to demonstrate how these REST APIs are created. I'm not going to focus on security today. We can look at JSON Web Tokens much later on in the course, but today I just want to focus on really how we can be able to create these REST APIs. So to begin with, I will open my folder. So yeah, I can open my folder here where we're doing our project. Actually, what I will do is I will go into my C drive here. I'll go into the XAMPP folder. Now remember, I'm using PHP, so I'll go into the XAMPP folder because that's where I need to, that's the default location for where my OSs are located. Then inside the XAMPP folder, I'll go to the htdocs folder. Then from the htdocs folder, I'll create my Expedia directory here. So I'll come to show more options, or I can just go to new directly, then new folder, new folder. Then I call it Expedia. Expedia, like that. So this Expedia is where all our code is going to go into. So a couple of things that I need to do as far as housekeeping is concerned. We want to do an object-oriented, we want to do rather object-oriented programming with PHP. So with object-oriented programming, we're going to use the MVC framework. That is the Model View Controller framework, where the models are the entities, the controllers are the things that are controlling the entities, and the views are now where the interfaces that interface with the controller to gain access to the model. So we're going to use the MVC model. So since we're using the MVC model, what I could do here is to create folders for models, another folder for controllers. I might not need the views for now, but you can just create the folder anyway in anticipation of us creating the web pages later on. So I have controllers. So literally these two are the ones that I'm going to need for today. If you want, you can be able to go ahead and add controllers. Somebody wants to ask something. Well, since I'm using different windows, I think sometimes it will be good if you just spoke so that I avoid going back and forth as far as chat is concerned. Okay. And again, those who are coming late, I already told you, I don't like you discussing, disturbing the class once I have gotten started. So I'm going to give you one last opportunity. See, if you can't come 5 minutes before time or after time, please just wait for the recording and view it later because it means that this is not important, okay? And let the others who are in time enjoy the class freely. So this is the last opportunity I'm going to give you to join the class later. Otherwise, you'll have to wait for the recording later on. I can see some are still even coming as late as 15 minutes. I don't know if online you come late. I don't know what would happen if it was a physical class. So this is the last opportunity I'm giving you. If you come late after 5 minutes and I have already started, I will not admit you in the class. Even if it's only one person who is there, I just record it so you can follow up the video much later on. Okay, so let's go back to what we were doing because now you see you take me off from what I'm supposed to be doing, and of course you also make the class lose track of whatever it is that they're supposed to be doing. So anyway, I've gone to XAMPP, I go to my C drive, XAMPP, htdocs, then I created a folder called Expedia. Then inside Expedia, I created two folders, one for models and one for controllers. And the purpose of this I've said is because we want to create REST APIs, which we can now easily integrate with our database without necessarily using the database tools to test if our stored procedures are working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this in Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to say CMD here. to open this window here with the command prompt. Then I'll type code dot. However, you want to open that folder with Visual Studio Code, that is your prerogative. You can decide to open it however you feel like. I just think that opening it this way usually makes it much easier. So now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to come to controllers here, another models here, and I'll create a file called db.php because I'm using PHP for purposes of doing this demonstration. So it's going to create that file. My machine is a little bit sluggish today. I don't know why, but let me give it a couple of seconds to generate the file. Probably it's trying to check at the back what's going on. But I want to believe that file does not exist in that folder, so it should have been able to finish it directly. So I have this db.php over here. So this is going to be the file that allows me to connect to the database. Now, we're going to use object-oriented PHP. So in short, what we're going to do is to create models, which are basically classes in PHP. Then the classes are going to have some properties, which are the attributes of the classes. Then they're going to have methods, which are the things that can be invoked by the class in order to be able to perform some action. So that's what we are going to do. I believe you have learned what you call object-oriented programming. So I'm just showing you how to actually implement it in real life. So PHP, we usually start with the PHP tag like that, then we close with the PHP tag, though the closing tag is not a must. So every time you're typing PHP, it has to be somewhere like this, inside here, something like that. So what I want to do here is I want to do a few things. So because we are going to manage sessions, so I can say here session start. So session is basically something that holds variable for us based on the user who was logged in. Remember, HTTP is a sessionless protocol, which means that once you connect and you disconnect, then you cannot be able to keep track of where you are. And sessions help us in being able to track where we are as far as the application is concerned, whether a user has logged in and all those kinds of stuff. So I'm not going to use it now, ideally, but of course, as we move into application, then we are going to be able to see how this works out. Then I also declare another variable called SQL. This is going to be a global variable where we're going to supply our SQL statement. The SQL statement to be executed is usually going to be stored in this variable. So I'll define it like that. Then now I'll begin my object, which is my class. So I'll simply say here, create a new class called database. So that's how you define a class in PHP. Now this class will have various methods. Now for us to connect to database, there's several things that you need to have. We need to have the server name. We need to have the database name. We need to have the username for the database, for the server.
Excuse me, sir. You're moving too fast.
I am moving too fast.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to move a little bit too slow, even though this is recorded. So probably maybe during the recording you can be able to slow it down a bit. But okay, thank you. I'll move a little bit slower. So as I said, um, if we are implementing PHP, usually you start with this PHP tag. So square angle bracket, angle greater than bracket, question mark PHP, then you close it like that. So it means all the code that is inside here is actually PHP code. So it's going to be translated as PHP. I said I start a session here because mostly when you connect from your browser to a server, because PHP is going to be a web server, it means that we're going to use HTTP or HTTPS, which are sessionless protocols, which means they cannot be able to remember what they were doing previously. So they just connect and disconnect. So I'm going to use the session to be able to track what connections are available, if the user has logged in, if a session is active, and all that kind of stuff. Then the SQL variable, I've said, this is where we're going to supply all the statements we want to execute as far as our database is concerned. So we're going to store it inside these variables. All variables in PHP start with $sign. Then I'm saying, because we're using object-oriented programming, I declare a class which is called database. And for this particular class, I said there are several things that we need to connect to our database. We need the server name, we need the database name, we need the username, we need the password, and also the character set to use. So these are the 5 things that we need in order to be able to connect to our database. So I will declare them as properties, and the scope for these properties is going to be private, which means they are only going to be accessible within this class object itself, not outside the class object. So I'll declare them as private. So what I can do here, again, I'm trying to Imagine that you've done object-oriented programming, and when I'm talking about scope variables, if I talk about public, if I talk about private and inherited, you know what all these things mean. So I'm just trying to show you how we implement them in real life. So for these five properties, I'm going to implement them as private properties, which means that they're only going to be accessible inside this class. You can't be able to access them outside the class. Only inside this class is where they're going to be accessible, and that's basically it. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a private variable called, I'll start with the server name. I don't need to give it a value. Then I'll declare another one called username. Okay, a database name. I can follow the order that I have up there. Database name. Then I can have another private, which is going to be username. So whenever it's a variable, always make sure it starts with a dollar sign. Then I'm going to declare another one called password. I'm declaring them this way because I want you to be able to reuse this class later on into the future if you're doing other projects. So it's going to be a little bit easier for you to declare them as variables where you can just go ahead and change them. Otherwise, I could just output the values inside the string, and that's basically it. But because we want scalability, that's why I'm showing us how to be able to make it this way so that now it makes it a little bit easier for us to be able to scale this application or even reuse this particular class in the future if we need to reuse it in a different project. Then we also have the character set, private character set, char set, like that. So those are variables that can only be accessible from within the DB class itself. So the other thing I need is to identify the methods. And the methods that I need here are basically just three. One to connect to the database, one to fetch data, then the other one to convert that data to JSON because we're going to create a REST API, and most of the REST API responses are in the form of JSON objects. So I'm only going to have three properties, three methods. That is connect, get data, and convert to JSON or get JSON. So that way we're able to do everything in one single class. So I'll begin with the first one. I'll create a function called connect. Called connect. Connect does not need any parameters, so it's just going to connect us to the database. So I'll put a comment here. Connect to the database. Connect to the database like that, right? So to connect the database, we're going to do several things. We're going to set the server name. So we're going to set these variables over here. We set the server name, set the database name, set username, set password, and set the character set. So I'm going to come here and say this refers to the current object, and I'm going to say server name. This the server name is equals to, now my server name is local, so I'm going to say localhost like that. Okay. Then I can set the other variable, which is the database name. So this database name is the name of the database that we want to use. So if I open my SQL log and I connect here and I pick Expedia flight booking. So this is the name of my database. It's called Expedia flight booking. So I'll pick it here and say Expedia flight booking. That's the name of my database. Then I'm also going to set up my username. The username for MySQL by default is root. So it's actually this. So this is root. And then of course I need the password for the database. My database does not have a password, it's blank. And then I can also set the character set. Then I'll say this is UTF-8MB4. So this is the character set that I use inside my database. I'll just show you that right so that you appreciate that. So if I come to my database here, and I click on this, and um, I say alter, you'll see that the character set is UT. F8 and before. So this is the character set that I'm using. So since I want to connect and I want to maintain that, I'll specify that. So these are the parameters I need to connect to my database. I need the server where I'm connected. By the way, if the server was in a different place and I have the IP address, I'll definitely just put the IP address over there. Okay. Then the database that I want to access, I also put the name of the database I want to access, the username for the database, and the password for the database, and which character set to use. So I have already specified these parameters. So I have set these properties. So you can see I'm only setting them inside the class itself. These things are not accessible outside the class. So I cannot access them from out here. I can't come here and say server name. It's not going to be accessible from here. It has to be only accessible from inside the class. So that's why we define them as private. And of course, you can see we don't need to change them from outside the class because these are properties that you're using for the database exclusively. Now that you have set up these parameters, let's connect to the database and see if it is connecting successfully. Now, those people who are trying to come in, I think I'll just ignore them. They'll probably follow the video later on. So the other thing I need to do is I'll try the connection, and if there's any error, then I also catch the error. So I'll say try connecting the database. If any error occurs, catch that particular error like that. So this is very important for us to be able to see how that works out. Now, what's going to happen is I want to use something called PDO or PHP data object. PHP database object. So I'm going to use PDO to connect to my MySQL server. And why I'm using PDO is in future, if I decide to use a different database, say something like Oracle or maybe Microsoft Access or even SQL Server or or Postgres or whatever it is, then the PDO is the only thing I'll change and everything else in my program works right off the bat. So I'm going to use PDO to connect that database. You can use MySQLi, but that will mean that you're loading only MySQL drivers, which means that if you wanted to change your database to something else, like another database, you might have to change your entire code together. So that's why I will need to use PDO as a database, as the tool to connect to my database. So what I'm going to do is, since I'm trying to connect, I'll create a data source name, which is DSN. So this is a data source name. So in this data source name, I'm going to provide certain parameters for the connection. By the way, uh, DSN is a very wide topic, so you might want to research further on it. But for purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to show you how to create a data source name to connect to a MySQL database. We have DSN for connecting to Postgres, DSN for connecting to Oracle, DSN for connecting to Sybase or any other enterprise or user database system that are out there. So for now, I'm only going to focus on how to connect DSN to MySQL. So with DSN, the first thing you need to do is to tell it the driver to use. So the driver to use is MySQL in my case. That's the driver I want to use. Then I put a full colon. Then in MySQL, it needs to know the host. Who is the host? So in the host, I'll put is equals to sign. Then I'll put a dot because in PHP we concatenate strings with dots. So since my host is going to be the server name over here, so what I'm going to say is going to be this object get me the server name. You could have output the string there directly, but I prefer to use a variable so that in future, in case I want to make changes, I simply make the changes to the variables over here. Or I can actually store this data in a text file somewhere, then load just text file directly rather than typing in the data directly here like this. So it makes it a little bit more flexible, more secure, and even more scalable in terms of you reusing this for other applications. So MySQL host is the server name. Then after the host, you put a semicolon. Then it will ask you what is the database name to use. So what is the DB name? Then you also put equal to sign. Then my DB name is this dot. I think we call it database name like that. Then I put another semicolon. Then it now asks me for my character set. So for my character set, I'll use this dot character set. I'm saying dot because most programming languages use dot. PHP, on the other hand, uses the slim arrow. So that is my data source name, as you can see like that. So once I define my data source name, then I need to define a new PHP PDO object. Then from the PDO object, I can now be able to provide the DSM, the username, and the password. So I simply say the PDO is equals to a new PDO object like that. Then I'll need to tell you the data source name to use, which is DSN, what I've defined up here. You could have outputted the string here directly. Then it'll ask you for the username of the database. This is the username. Then it'll ask you a password, this dot password, like that. Okay, so that will allow me to create a new connection to my database. If everything is fine, it will connect successfully. If there are issues, then we will want to capture those issues. Okay, so that will be that. Now, because I need to show errors when they occur, I'll simply say this video object that I have over here, I want to set some attributes to it. And the attributes are going to be error attributes. So which means that if an error occurs, give me the error itself so that I'm able to read the error and I'm able to understand how that error works out. So I'll say this dot set attribute like that. Then the attribute that I want to set here is a PDO attribute, and the attribute is actually attribute error mode attribute attribute R mode attribute R mode, and the attribute error mode would be a PDO object of error exception. So that would be attribute. Actually, it's error exception of attribute. This is error exception, like that. So PDO set attribute, which is the error mode, the attribute error mode, it will be the error exception. So it means that it's going to output for me the error directly. So up to that point, it's okay. If everything is okay, it's going to connect. If everything is there's an issue that happens, it will be able to throw back that issue to me and tell me what that issue is all about. Maybe invalid username, invalid password, invalid database name, invalid character set, invalid server, incorrect statement, and so forth and so forth. So it should be able to tell me what the issue is going to be. So the next thing is I need to catch the error. So to catch the error, I'll simply need to come here and specify the error object. The error object is going to be a PDO error. So it's going to be a PDO exception. PDO exception. And I'm going to use it as E, as error like that. So then after that, I just need to probably say, well, I need to return the PDO here. Sorry. If the connection is successful, return for me the connection because I'll need the connection when I need to execute any query. Then after this, if any error occurs, I'll simply let me just echo the error so that I'll say sorry, an error occurred or connection failed. Then probably I can give you the error. So I'll simply say error dot get message like that. So in the event that I'm not able to connect, it should be able to tell me what error occurred. Now this is very standard part of the code because most likely you're going to be writing it in this particular format and fashion. Okay, so it's not going to be such a big deal. So just you can copy and paste this in your future project. Then you can maybe just change the parameters as necessary. But I want you to be able to understand exactly how we construct it. So I've declared private variables over here because I only want them to be accessible within this class. Then I have assigned them variables. Then I'm trying to connect, and if any error occurs, then I would put this error over here. Okay. So after that, I need to create another class now for fetching the data. So I'll say function get data. I'll give it an SQL statement so that I am able to get data based on the SQL statement that has been passed. So what I'm going to do here, I'll simply say for me to get my data, I'll simply just return. I'll simply just return this current object, and I'll simply say connect. So connect is this function up here. So it will connect to the database and give me back a PDO object. So when I have that PDO object, I'll simply say query that PDO object based on the SQL statement that has been provided. So it is that simple. So I'm saying when I say get data, I mean check the current object click on the connect method. Then on the connect method, it will return a PDO object. Then the PDO object that has been returned execute the following query. All right, so that's how that works out. Then I can also have another function for converting this data to JSON, because we said that mostly if you're using REST API, most of the data is going to be returned as JSON. So function, I'll say get JSON, or you can call it convert JSON. It will depend on what you want to have. Then from here, we can now go ahead and output the JSON object. So what will happen is I'll create a record set. The record set means it will be holding the values that you're working with. So record set will basically just execute this get data, because it's going to execute the query and give me back the results, because you can see it's doing a return up here. So RST will be get data, then I put my SQL like that. Okay. So after that, that information is going to be stored in this record set. So once I have that record set, then the only thing I need to do is to convert it to a JSON object. So JSON object, I'll simply say return. There's a PHP function called JSON encode. JSON encode. So JSON encode, then I'll take the record set that I have. I will fetch all the rows. After I fetch all the rows, I'll simply tell it to return an associative array of the PDO. So fetch, I think it's supposed to be fetch associative, which is the default anyway, but I just always want to make sure that it returns the correct one. So again, this will be able to return for me a JSON object. Again, these are very standard things, and we can reuse this over and over again in as many projects as possible. I just wanted us to understand how this works out. So again, get data will just execute the connect method. The connect method is going to return a PDO object. Then after I get the PDO object, I will run this query command based on this SQL as far as this data, this object is concerned. So, and when it comes to get JSON, I'll say get data because it's going to return for me the query execution results. Then I store them on the record set. After I store them on the record set, then I can encode them as JSON. Then I can fetch all the data as associative array. So it's going to be value column field. So this is how the DB class is going to look like. Of course, you can add as many things as possible here, but I think for now, this should be able to do. Now, this is going to be our core connection. This is what is going to allow us to connect to the database within a single file. So everything else you're going to build is going to be built on top of this DB class. So we are going to exercise the concept of inheritance. So we're going to exercise the concept of inheritance. So let me create another class. So like for example, we have cities. If I come to my database here, Expedia, we have cities. And cities has its own CRUD operations like create, read, update, delete, and so forth and so forth. So I want us to be able to see how, okay, let me start with countries, not cities. Let me start with countries and let's see how we can create a REST API for manipulating the countries. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another model here called countries.php. Then, because DB is the only one that connects to the database, I'll need to integrate DB into my countries. So I'll come here and create this PHP object like that. Then I will say require once. So I'll require this file called db.php. So what happens is I want to pick this file called db.php and copy its content inside here. So it's like coming here, taking whatever is here, right clicking, saying copy, and pasting it inside here. That's what this require means. Then after I require that, because I already have that code, I can create a new class called country. Then I want to use inheritance, so I'll say it extends the database like that. Okay, so from here, I'm creating its country, not country. So I'm creating a new class called country, but it takes all the properties of DB. So it means it can connect with the database, it can get data, and it can get JSON. So it can execute all these three methods. And at the same time, I can be able to access these properties that I have here because it is an extension of that particular class. That is kind of like how inheritance works. So we're just implementing object-oriented programming in real life to be able to show you how this works out. So On the country, I can have function like get countries. Okay, let's start from the top. It could be check country, check if country exists. Then I can have another function called save country. Then I can have another one get countries. Then I can have another one get country details. Then last one delete country. So all these are the things you can do with a country. So to check a country, this is basically checking if a country exists or not. So I don't have a stored procedure for checking countries, so I can go back and create it. So I can say sp check country. So I just need to provide the country name and the country ID. So I'll say country ID, which is integer, and country name, which is variable character 100. I doubt you're going to specify more than 100, but well, let's just use 100 for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all fields from countries where the country ID is not equal to the country ID specified and the country name is equals to the country name. So something like that. So if any records are returned from this, it means the country exists. So I'll execute that. Then I'll pick this stored procedure. I will come back here. I'll declare, because I have SQL variable over here, I just set the SQL variable. Remember I said when you say require once, then you take a file. It's like say coming to this file, copying whatever is inside it, then pasting it inside here. So I already have the SQL variable up here because it's up here as you can see. So that's kind of like how it works. So here I simply said SQL is equals, you said for you to execute a stored procedure, you say call, then you put the details of the stored procedures like that. So usually I remove the variables like that. That's what we are doing. Then because these are going to be PHP variables, I'm going to pass them here. So I'll need the country ID and I'll need the country name. So what I'm going to do here is um, because these are variables, all variables in PHP, if they pass a string, you have to enclose them in curly brackets like that. And if it is a string, you also introduce the single quotation mark like that. So single quotation mark and string and string quotation like that. So the angle bracket, the curly brackets, and single quotation mark if they're string. So that will set me the query to execute. So what I need to do is just to return if the current object, then I'll simply say get data, then I'll pass SQL. So remember, we said this extends DB, so it means that DB has a method called get data. If I come to DB, we wrote here get data. So get data is going to fetch the data for us and return for us that data. So because it extends DB, it's able to execute that, and that data is going to be returned. Now, since I return this data, I just need to know if it has rows or not. So I'll simply say row count. So if it doesn't have any rows, it means it does not exist. If it has any rows, it means it exists. So that's why I've included this one. So we're just trying to see how we can use PHP to be able to execute these queries. So that is how to check. So it will always return true or false. Okay. Now, when it comes to saving the country, again, I'll come here and say SQL is equals to call. So saving country is already in our database. So I'll come here and say save country, which is here. Alter. I'll just copy this part over here, copy, and I'll paste it here like that. I'll remove the variable names like that and like that. Then of course we'll enclose this one in curly brackets, and because this one is a string, we first of all start with a single quotation mark, then curly braces. Then of course we add a semicolon. All PHP statements must end with a semicolon. Then once we are done, we're simply going to say this. Now I'm going to say get data. Get data is when I want to save something to the database. Get JSON is when I want to extract something from the database and output it on my REST API. So I'll be using them interchangeably. So get data if I want to store something on the database. Get JSON if I want to extract something and output it on the browser or on the client that calls the REST API. So that is how this is going to work out. So again, I'll get data, so I'll put the SQL statement over here. Of course, it's going to execute, and if everything works fine, nothing is going to be returned. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say here return. So I'm going to return an array with a status of success and a message that says country saved successfully. So this is kind of like the kind of response you're going to give somebody in form of a JSON object. Okay, so you can see it's pretty clean because nowhere does my PHP know exactly what to do. The only thing it knows that it's calling a stored procedure, it gives it the parameters, and it executes. Then if there are no errors, it simply is successful. It simply tells me it is successful and it gives me that message. It's as simple as that. Of course, here I'll need to specify the country ID and the country name like that. So that should be able to allow me to save countries. To get countries, I don't need any parameters. I'll simply say MySQL statement is equals call. Then I'll come to get countries here, alter, copy this. It does not have any parameters as you can see. Paste it here. Now, because get countries will always be returning data to the browser, we'll simply say return, then we return, then the current object, then I say get JSON. Then I'll pass my SQL statement like that. So that will pick the data and return it as a JSON object. Okay. So when it comes to getting country details, I'll need the country ID over here. So for the country for the country details, I'll simply say the SQL statement. So you can see why I declared the SQL variable is because I was intending to use it several times. So get country details is here. Author. I'll pick it up. It has one variable, country ID. Copy like that. Sorry. Of course, we have to enclose this one in curly braces like that. Again, because also when you're getting country details, we want to return it as a JSON object. So we'll say return this get JSON. Then the SQL statement. So it just execute it, convert it into JSON object, then that is what we return to the calling script. Then for deleting country, we're not going to return JSON. Of course, we're going to return JSON like this particular statement over here, but not directly from the database. So again, to delete a country ID, we need the country ID so that we delete a specific ID. Here we're going to say SQL is equals, sorry, SQL is equals call. Then I'll say delete country. So I'll pick delete country then, copy it, paste it, remove the data type, and enclose this in curly braces. I'll put a semicolon at the end of that statement. I'll say this dot get data because every time I want to execute a query without returning results, I'll say get data. Then, of course, if there is no error, it's going to return success. So it's me for me to tell the user that it's successful. So I'll return another array with a status of success and a message of the country was deleted successfully. So And that, by the way, forms the CRUD operations as far as our country is concerned. Now, this is a class. This class will not do anything on its own. It's just going to sit there. It's like a template. When you have a template and you don't use it to produce anything, it's just a template. It does not do anything. It just sits there and wait. So we have to find a way of being able to use this class so that now we can be able to check if a country exists, save a country, get countries, get country details, or even delete a country. So this country as a model here does not do anything. Actually, it's at the wrong place. I need to cut it and paste it inside the models here. So they need to be in the same level with DB. Okay, they have to be in the same folder. So my models are okay. So I have a model called DB. This allows me to connect to the database. Then I have a model called country. This allows me to be able to perform CRUD operations as far as countries are concerned. Now let's see how we can actually be able to use this country to create a new object for of the country, then execute these methods as far as the country is concerned. And that's where now controllers come in. Remember, this one is a template. It does not do anything unless you tell it to, but the controller will now act as the connection between the user interface and the object itself. So now it is able to execute or invoke the methods that are implemented by the country over here. So I'll come to controllers here and I'll create a new file and I'll call it country operations dot php. So on country operation.php, of course, this is a PHP file like that. Okay. So since it's a PHP file, first things first, I will require once I need to get these countries here. So because this, I need to go back. This one is inside controllers. So I need to jump outside controllers. So once I jump outside controllers, I need to go into models. So I go into models. Then once I'm inside models, I'll simply say countries.php. That is how I'm going to load this file over here. So from where this file is, I put two dots and a slash. It means go up one level. So it's going to go into outside the folder called controllers. Then from there, look for a folder called models. So it's going to jump into this folder called models. Then inside the folder called models, get me a file called countries.php, which is the one that we have here. So that should be able to load for me all the code that is here. So it's like taking the code that is here and copying it and pasting it inside here. That's kind of like how what you're trying to achieve. Then once that is done, I'll declare a variable called country. Then country will be a new country. So remember, this is a variable. This is an actual object. This is a template. This is a class. So a class does not do anything. This class here does not do anything. But this particular object is what can perform those actions. So it instantiates a new instance of country. Then from there now, we are able to invoke all the methods as far as country is concerned. So the only thing I'll need to do is to check what is the user trying to do. So here I'll say if is set, the user can say post. If the user say post and they say save country, so if there's a post command that says save country, not country, then what do? We need to save the country. So what we need to do is we need to take the country ID that has been provided. So post country ID. We also need the country name. I'll say post country name like that. Okay. Then now we can decide to save the country. So we can say our response would be take the country and execute the following method. The method to execute is save country here. Okay. So when I say save country, then it will save the country. Then the response, whatever is output, which is this value over here, if it is successful, will be stored inside this variable called response. So what I can do here, I can just say echo JSON encode the response. So if everything is fine, I'll just encode the response. So if there's no error, then it will just output for me the value. It will just output for me success. If there is any error, because we said if any error occurs, then just output that error as it is. So it will tell me whatever error occurred. So that's kind of like what we're trying to do when you're setting up these DB and these countries models. So they help us in being able to execute things directly in our database without the need of using the database tools. So pretty much I have done my first REST API. So I can actually call this REST API and execute something on the database without necessarily opening the database. Now that introduces me to another tool called Postman. So you also need to have Postman installed on your system so that you can test if your REST APIs are actually working. And this is how you use Postman to test if this actual API is working. This is our API, by the way. So the endpoint is Expedia country operations, then we're going to post some data on country operations. So based on what data we pass, we'll determine that data and execute code as appropriate as far as that API is concerned. So really, this is how we create our REST APIs in PHP or maybe any other programming language that is out there. The principle is ideally the same. So let's test that and see how it works. So I'm going to open Postman. I said just install Postman. It's a piece of software. Install it on your computer if you don't have it. Then open it. Once you open it, it should allow you to be able to execute um, uh, APIs without necessarily having a user interface. So I have my Postman over here. So what I'm going to do here is I can create a new request by clicking on this plus here. So it will open a new window. Now the request, as you can see, what I expect here is actually a post request. So instead of get, I'll say here post. Then I'll put my URL. My URL is localhost. Then the folder is Expedia. And I'm going to go into controllers and I'll access file called um, country operations.php. So country operations.php. So that is my endpoint. That's where I need to go. Then I need to supply some data. Now to supply this data, because it is post, I'm going to come to body over here. I'm going to say form data. And from the form data, I'm going to give my keys. Now my keys are three. The first key is which action is going to be performed. The action to be performed is save country. So I'll save country here and I'll put it to true. The next one is country ID, and I'll set it to 0 because I want to create a new country. Then the other one is country name. Then I'll give the name of the country Eritrea, like that. So if everything was to happen correct properly, then down here I should see success. The country has been saved successfully. Those people who are coming late, I'm not going to allow them to join. Let them stay outside there. They are going to follow the video later on. So I'm going to say send. Now, if everything is okay, I should be able to see here success. So you can see fatal error, call to undefined function, get message. So get message, which means it's trying to connect to the database and it's kind of like finding an error. So let me see what the issue is with that get message. So I'll come back to my country. E, it's not dot, actually it is that. Now that's the problem of getting used to. I'm used to JavaScript and JavaScript uses dot a lot. So sometimes I kind of like get confused on that. So this should be the actual way of referring to that field name. So I'll try that again. So it could not find the driver. So the driver that I've specified, which is MySQL here, is looks like it's not finding it. I don't know why it's not finding it. So let me see. Um, let me see. Open a new window. Actually, I had a previous one here that I've been using before. So I'll just pick this and then let me just check here. The driver is supposed to be what? Yeah, that's actually it. MySQL. Or I've typed something else. Well, let me just copy and paste this. Though I want to believe it's more or less the same thing. Let me paste it up here. Oh, I missed the Y. Sorry, I missed the Y. MySQL. Yeah, yeah, mistake happens. So you see, if it is not able to connect, it's going to give me an error. Like you can see, connection failed, and it gives me the exact error that happened. Okay, so I'll try again. So it's telling me unknown database, Expedia flight booking. So it's not seeing this database called Expedia flight booking. So I'll come back again here, and I'll right click here, and I'll say alter. Well, I don't even need to do that. I can just double click on this file here. Then I copy this and I paste it inside here like that. So then I try again. I'll send. Then it tells me error exception. So probably how I define the error exception is a problem. Let me see what it looks like. Yeah, sometimes I don't get these things directly, so it should be. It is error mode exception, so I missed that. Should be error mode exception. So as you can see, I also make mistakes, but it's because I don't usually do this every other time. So it should be error mode exception. I missed mode here. So that's how it should look like. So I try that again, send it. So you can see status, country saved successfully. So if I go to my database, I'm expecting to see Eritrea as a country. So when I come here and I come to countries and I open here and I refresh, you can see Eritrea is actually a country over there. We can try to add Eritrea again. It's saying it's successful, but let's look at the database. It's successful, but when I refresh this, no new editor has been added. Now, what I need to do, I know the database will take care of itself. It's not going to add a country that exists. And that's why I went ahead and created this newer method here that says check country. So what I needed to do here was to first of all check if the country exists, and then I tell the user as appropriate, because the database will not check if it exists. It will only check if it exists, but it does not tell you whether it exists or not. That's why I created this new method. So I'll simply say if this function here, check country, returns true. If this returns true, because what I've told it to do is to check whether it has rows or not. So if it has rows, it will return true. If it does not have rows, it will return false. So if it returns true, I'll simply also say return. Then I'll give status of exists and a message of country name already exists. Okay. Otherwise, if that is not true, then I will go ahead and now create the new country, or create country, or update the country, whatever is going to be necessary. So let's try to run that again and see how that works out. Now, I am not constantly saving this data, but ideally in your case, you will constantly need to be saving as you type, you save the data. What I've done is I've come to file here and I've checked autosave. So what this autosave does is that it helps me to be able to automatically save the code as I am typing. So I don't need to constantly click on save and back and forth. So if you wanted similar behavior, you can also do the same. Otherwise, if you don't do that, then after you make changes to your code, you simply need to press Control S or come to File, then Save As. So it will depend on what you really prefer. But I prefer autosave so that as I just type my code, it saves it automatically and I don't need to remember saving it. That's why I'm just typing and I'm moving back and forth to test how it's working. So if I do that, you can see now it says status, it exists, the country exists. But you can also put a country that does not exist. I know Burundi does not exist. So if I type Burundi, you can see Burundi has been saved successfully. If I try to save Burundi again, it tells me Burundi exists. So we have literally created an API, as you can see. Now, this is independent of what front end you're going to use on your application. So whether you want to use an Android app, whether you want to use a web-based app, whether you want to create a desktop app, whatever it is that you want to create as far as your app is concerned, it won't matter. The API would just accept the variables, then it will be able to give you back feedback in form of a JSON object. Now, then you can be able to output that to your user. And that is how these APIs work. Okay. Now, before I move to other examples of API, because we have to do more than one so that it actually sticks in, is there any question up to that point? Is there a question up to that point? You can raise your hand. You can open your mic.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Felix.
I was asking where you are using the dollar sign.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was rejecting, so I opted to use the underscore, and it
Working.
executed.
Yeah,
Is it an option?
it's not a problem. What happens is it depends on what environment you're using. Like if you're using Workbench, it's not going to accept dollar sign. I think even PHP my admin, we just need to force it to use dollar sign. But that is not a very strict requirement as far as MySQL is concerned. And why I opted to use dollar sign is because you can see our PHP code uses dollar signs as variables. So I was just preempting how I'm going to write my code as efficiently as possible without necessarily replicating a few things. So you can see PHP requires me to use dollar sign as variable names. So that's why I use them in the stored procedures themselves. So that when I come back to PHP, they look more or less similar. But it's not a requirement. It's not even a good practice either, but for me, it's convenient so that I don't have to retype the variable names over and over again. So if your environment does not allow you to use dollar sign, yeah, you can use an underscore or any other prefix that is accepted by your environment. Actually, most people call it var. They put var underscore then the name of the variable. Okay, Felix, is that clear?
Yes.
Any other question? So you can see now we're starting to get to the realm of how you actually develop real life applications based on the things that you had learned previously. So there is what you had learned, there is actually how you use it in real life applications. And this is where now they apply. I have explained several concepts here. I've explained the concept of object oriented programming. I've created a class, I have created inheritance, and I've also invoked the class by creating an MVC model where now I can use my controller to create an instance of the class. Then I invoked a method of the class, and I'm actually able to see what kind of feedback it's giving me back and forth. And that class of mine, as you can see, connects to my database, which means it is actually doing the things that I want it to do. So the database is going to listen, it's going to accept the parameters, then it's going to execute the stored procedure and give me back the feedback when necessary. So this is kind of like how you design enterprise applications. Okay. And when you're doing a project, I'm kind of like expecting this is exactly what you're going to do. Okay? Can we go on? So that was just one example. We can do a couple so that at least it now sinks in properly. Okay? So we have done one, which is actually we've done two, which is we have done two in one. We have checked the country, and before we save a country, we check if it exists. And by the way, and we have seen that that is working. Let's see how we can get countries. So to get countries, I'll now come back to my operations over here. Here I said if is set post save country. Now, if I want to get countries, I'm not going to use post, but you can also use post if you like. But I like using get. So I'll come here and say if is set get. Remember, when you're talking about form submission, we have various options that you can do to a form. As you can see over here, we have post, we have get, we have put, we have patch, delete, head, and options. Mostly, I only use get and post. The rest you can use them if you need to, but for me, get and post is just enough. Now, what's the difference between get and post? Get will append your parameters as part of the URL. Post, on the other hand, will send your data as a form. So if you're sending secure data like passwords or things like that, use post. But if you just want to fetch data, then you can use get, which is what I want to use now. So here I'll say get. If you said get, then I say get countries. So if somebody says get countries, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to echo because Get JSON already converts. If I say get JSON, you can see get JSON already encodes that data as a JSON object. So I don't need to encode it further. The others that I was using, like something like save country, you can see I'm just returning an array. That's why I was encoding it when I was outputting it. But if I'm used, say if I want to use JSON encode, I have in JSON encode as a function, I've already encoded that data. So I just echo that result as it is. So here I'll simply say echo, then I'll say country, then which method do I execute? I execute get countries. As simple as that. And that will list for me all the countries that I have like that. So when I come back here and I say add a new a request, then this is get, then I can just copy and paste this URL because it's the same URL. The only thing I put is here the parameters I have get countries and I send it to true. So when I run that, I should be able to see a list of countries here. So fatal call to undefined function get data. So I don't have get data. So let me see what the problem is. Let me see what the problem is. So db get data. Oh, so I didn't forgot to mention this dot get data. So get data directly is not a function, but get data is a function of this class. Okay, so that was a mistake. Send it over. Then you can see I have a list of all the countries as an array, which is really what I want. And this is if say I was populating a country from an Android app, I'll simply pick this object, look through it, and get the country ID and the country name, and I'm able to view that data inside a browser window or whichever tool you want to use, so to speak. Okay, we can go ahead and do a third one. Maybe say we can get country details. So maybe say we provide country ID number 9, then we see what country it is. So I can come here and I'll say under country operations, I'll say if is set get, then get country details. Okay, then I'll need to get the country ID. Get country ID, right? So once I get the country ID, then I'll just need to echo country. Then I will execute the method called get country details, which is here. And you can see it accepts country ID, then it will be able to do its own work. So I'll do that and I put a semicolon. So I can come again and test, maybe introduce a new request here. I'll paste my endpoint, is the same endpoint up to here. Then here, now I'll put get countries, get country details, get country details, which is true. Then I'll put now my country ID, which is say 9. I want country number 9. So if everything is fine, I should be able to see details of Burundi. So country ID has not been defined. Country ID, I've seen it's been defined here. So let me just see what happened. So sometimes we make mistakes when we write the API. So country ID is fine. This is county ID. So you can see I misspelled here country. It should have been country ID. So sometimes, yeah, those mistakes do happen. So I'll run it again. Then you can see it actually gives me Burundi. Then we can do the last part, which is now delete the country. So I can come here and I'll simply say delete is going to be a post because when you're deleting, we're not just fetching data, we actually want to execute. Every time I want to execute something on the database, I usually use post. But if I just want to fetch data, I'll use get. Remember I said get embeds your parameters as part of the SQL string, but post sends them as a form object. So I'll simply say here if is set post delete country, delete country, you don't put space. So I'll need to specify the country ID. Country ID, like that. Then now I'll put my response will be, because I'm going to execute, I'm going to give back data. I'll say this country, then I'll say delete. Usually I don't like typing that directly because I've already defined them. I'll simply come here and copy, just to make sure that I am copying the correct name. Then country ID is actually there. Then of course what I'm going to do, I'm going to say echo JSON encode response. You can output the data here directly, but I like being step by step like that. So if everything is successful, then the country will be deleted successfully and it will not longer exist in my database. So let's just confirm. I have a country called Burundi here. Actually, I can delete Rwanda, ID number 6. I have a country called Rwanda here, ID number 6. So I can come to my API and delete Rwanda. So I'll create a new request. So I like creating new requests so that you can also go back and forth and test the parts of the API whenever there are mistakes. Since we're deleting, we're going to post. So I'm going to say here post. I'm going to put my endpoint, which is here. So I'm going to remove that. Then I'm going to say this is going to be a post. Then it's going to be form data. Then I'm going to say delete country. And country ID, this is going to be true because that's the action we want to do. Then country ID, I want to delete the sixth one. So if everything is successful, it will tell me the country was deleted successfully. Let's just confirm that that's the message that we are outputting. Countries, status, the country was deleted successfully. So if everything is successful, it should be able to output for me that. So I'll send that over. So undefined variable response. Okay, so that response that I have, what is it? Oh, I forgot to put an E at the end of it. Yeah, that's the correct spelling. So I will execute, and now you can see it tells me the country was deleted successfully. And of course, if I come to my database, I should not see Rwanda anymore. So you can see Rwanda is gone. So this is literally how we design our APIs. So PHP is very important because you can use PHP, you can use Node.js, you can use Ruby and Rails, you can use Python, you can use ASP.NET, really any backend language that you'd like. But PHP is the most popular one anyway. PHP is the most popular backend language anyway. So I'm showing you that because it's the most popular. So it makes it a little bit much more easier for you to be able to handle that. Okay. So yes, that's what we were intending to do as far as creating these APIs are concerned. You can see it takes a bit of effort to create an application. They usually look very easy, but if you want to create an enterprise application, you have to do certain things in certain ways. Now, this is important because it scales up your application. As you can see, what I have done is I'm using object-oriented programming, and here I am scaling up my application in such a way that this database class I can use it 100 times. So if I had 100 different models, I'll simply import DB and it will be able to connect for me, and I'm able to execute anything on my database. And if there is an issue, I'll just come to my DB platform. Then if the password has changed, I change the password and everything works right outside the box. If I need to add functionality, I'll simply come to DB and add functionality. If I need to change the database, I'll simply come to DB, change the database points over here, and everything else remains exactly the same. So this is the power of now using these enterprise tools, and that's why we are doing this software design lab idea to show you exactly how you build software for the enterprise. When you go outside there and you want to write code, this is exactly what you're expected to output. Again, you'll be doing your project, and this is going to be very, very important for you. Once you learn how to do the project, then just go ahead and implement the things that you're doing, and you should be able to come up with one of the best projects that I've seen. So only focus on the solution that you are providing and not necessarily how to provide the solution. Now, I think I'll take a break at that. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to give you time to go ahead and now create your own REST APIs for all the entities we have for our database. So that as we are continuing to build our application, what we have already covered, you are capable of using it as we move along. If there are any questions that need to be asked. Well, again, I've provided you with a tool that you should make use of at your disposal. I've given you a YouTube link. In that YouTube, I've created a playlist. In that playlist, I load the video, so it means you can be able to access the material at any time that you want. But at the same time, you can do a subscription so that now, if there's any question, just ask on the video and I'll be able to respond to it. Because I check that from time to time. If there's a question, I'll be able to respond to it at that particular point. So it makes it very, very easy for you to gain access to me. And of course, others will also gain access if they had similar problems. Probably the solution that I've provided for you in that video, they should also be able to have access to it. So it's a win-win situation for all of us. So let's use the tools that you provided as effectively as possible. Okay? So please take advantage of that while we're still here. Maximize this opportunity and see that you have gained the best that you can. Now, I think I'll stop at that. Then I'll leave you with the opportunity of now doing the rest of the things that we're supposed to do as far as our that is concerned. Remember, I've only done countries. We have cities, we have airports, we have airlines, we have flights, and so forth and so forth. Now you can go ahead and create it for all these other things that we have in our database. Then we can be able to go through them and see how you have fared with them. What I'm trying to achieve is I want to show you at the backstage what you're doing. I can create the entire app, but at least for the basics, you know how we get to achieve some of these components. Then now you can be able to replicate them in your own environment. Okay. So your task moving forward would be to create REST APIs for all the other entities you have for your database. If there's anything that you didn't understand, just ask me and I'll be able to answer you so that you don't get stuck. But again, you can see these things are building up very, very fast. There's an assignment that I gave last time. Most of you have not achieved it. Now I'm giving you another one. You're not going to achieve it. Next time we meet to class, I'm going to give you another one. And as we go on and on and on, by the time we're done with this course, most of you will not have submitted anything. And that is going to be a very big problem. So please just bear with me and make sure that you are able to achieve these tasks as we go by. Okay? So if there's any question, just let me know. Then I will answer that before I close this particular session. Any question or comment? You can raise your hand. You can switch on your mic. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up. Neither am I seeing any mic on, so it means that everybody is comfortable. So what you're going to, oh, okay, tasks. Cindy, you're asking for tasks. Yeah, I usually give tasks at the end of each class. There's one I gave, I think it was yesterday. Um, what's going to happen is tasks are given at the end of each class. I usually give you tasks every day and I tell you what you need to do. So I don't know, Cindy, what you mean by asking tasks. Yes, they're usually tasks at the end of the class, unless the class rep does not share them with you. But I also mention them in class like this. I've just said that the task due for this particular class is for you to create your own REST APIs for the other components you have for your database. I've only done countries. You can do cities, you can do airports, you can do airlines, you can do flights, you can do bookings, and so forth and so forth. Where you get stuck, you can ask. That this is really why it's called a software design lab. It's a lab. I'm supposed to tell you what to do. Then using that information, you implement the things that you have within your own project. That is why it is a lab, right? And not a class. So I intend for you to be able to use whatever we have learned to now read, understand, and implement on your own elements. Okay? Perfect. So I think I'll share this video. You can look through them over and over again. You want to subscribe to that channel. I'm not asking you to subscribe because I want to make money. I want you to subscribe so that you can take advantage of the channel. So if somebody asks a question and it is answered, you're able to see that. If I publish something new, if I make changes to anything as far as that content is concerned, you get updated. So it's more like it's a tool that's going to help you to make more out of this particular lab rather than just sitting there and waiting for me to come to class and show you what to do. And by the way, it can also make suggestions for you on other materials that can be useful related to what I am talking about that other people have done on their end. So that is advantage, not to my advantage. But I also want to make sure that you benefit the most from this. Okay? So yeah, I think I'll take a break at that. I will share the material. Those who are not coming to class or those who have come late, they can follow it up at that point. But please, if you come 5 minutes past the clock in time, I will not allow you in. So let's just agree on that from the word go, because then you tend to distract others. Once you get started and things are flowing, is when you want to move back and forth to allow you in. We're not going to allow that. So yeah, if you don't want to come, don't come. If you want to come, come early. So that I think is the policy that we're going to keep moving forward. So thank you and have a rest of your afternoon. Yeah, in case you have a question, allow me to be able to answer it on. Just ask on the video. On the video, then you can be able to answer everybody else who might have had that question or who could have encountered a similar problem. We want to kill as many birds as possible with one single stone. So thank you and have a rest wonderful of the day.